I'm going to be reading from the Annals of Witchcraft again. This is in 1692 that this section here takes place. I'll show you what I finally got the book, as you can see. This is what some of the text looks like, so you can see why this is very difficult to read. This section, respecting those who saved their lives by confessing themselves witches. Okay, now you see what I'm dealing with here. Anyway, here we go. 1692 from the book The Annals of Witchcraft. Respecting those who saved their lives by confessing themselves witches, it may be proper to remark that such confessions were wrung from them under circumstances calculated to excite the greatest pity and commiseration for those who made such confessions. For it must be borne in mind that all parties believed in witchcraft, and that some persons must be witches, and that the troubles complained of were caused by them. Imagine feeble women forced from their families and cast into cold and damp prisons with heavy irons upon them. 6 females of Andover were thus cruelly incarcerated. It came about in this wise. The wife of one Joseph Ballard was taken sick, and it was at once surmised that she was bewitched. To find out who were the witches, 2 of the afflicted at Salem were brought to Andover to make the discovery, and thus commenced the direful calamity which befell that town. At what time the 6 females were first suspected does not appear, but those in authority ordered them to come together at the meeting house, where, after a prayer was had by the minister, the accused were blindfolded and led up to the afflicted already in their fits. The suspected females being thus led up to them, and their hands placed upon them by their conductors, the afflicted were at once free from their fits, and said they were well. Whereupon, say the blindfolded, we were all seized upon as prisoners by the warrant from the justice of the peace, hurried off to Salem utterly amazed and astonished, and affrighted even out of our reason. Such was their introduction to the irons upon their limbs, and a near prospect of an ignominious death upon the gallows. This was their condition when friends beset them on every side to confess themselves as witches, as the only means of saving their lives. Hour after hour and day after day they were besought by dear and near kindred and friends to confess until they were worn out for want of rest and sleep. It is not strange that their minds wandered until they imagined they experienced what they had confessed, as that they rode through the air on poles to certain rivers or ponds, where they were baptized by the devil, that they had signed his book and given themselves to him soul and body, and thus bound themselves to worship him, that in return they could command him to afflict whomever they should designate. These things, being embodied in the indictment, were a guide to confessions, and were forced from them by leading questions. A contemporary says he is sure that most of the charges in those indictments would be better laid against the judges in the oyer and the terminer, for that those judges served if they did not worship the devil, and took him to their God whether they figured his book or not, whether they signed his book or not. Anyway, that's just another section of it. That's how people back in that time thought. They were so sure that these things had to be caused by witches. Anything evil, any sickness had to be caused by a witch. There was no natural cause for these things. It had to be supernatural by source. And that's how do you deal with that in that time? The people who were in charge, even, who knew what was going on, or who suspected that it was mostly delusions, kind of just had to keep their mouths shut, because they would have been accused of witches and hauled off the same as anyone else. So that's the time that they were living in. I'm glad we're not in that time today, even though we still have people who are in that mindset. that if you don't agree with them, if you don't say the things that agree with their religion, that you must be a devil worshiper, or Satan's got a hold of you, or whatever. There are still people like that, a lot of people like that, especially in this country. At least our laws are not so narrow now as they were at that time. Anyway, that's all for today. Thank you.